guys, in this video we're going to be doing 2A.2. Our Math 3 learning objective here is I can graph a quadratic equation by identifying the vertex. The first is, well, what is a vertex? A vertex is either the highest or the lowest point on a parabola. Right? If we remember from our last video, our parabola was that U shape. So if we have the lowest point, right? Remember that's when our A was positive, opening upward. That lowest point right there is what our vertex is. We call that a minimum. Right? This would be a minimum. If our vertex, we had a parabola facing downward, right? That's when our A value is negative. That gives us the highest point, which is a maximum. Right? And that's indicated to us by whatever either our A value is, and then we can also tell by the actual parabola shape itself. So once we're able to identify the vertex, we have to write it in vertex form. So it could be either opening upward or opening downward. We have the quantity of our x minus h squared plus k. Now remember that when we are writing in vertex form, our vertex is typically written in h comma k. So whatever our ordered pair is, our h comma k is the same h and the k that we're substituting when we are using vertex form. So what I mean by that is looking at example 1. It tells us to identify the vertex and then write the quadratic equation in vertex form. Well, our vertex for example number 1 is right here at a 2, negative 4. Now I have to do the hk part of this, and one thing that I would like you guys to remember is that because our h in our formula had that negative sign, what that means is that only the x changes its sign. So when I write this, I know I'm going to have my parentheses here. I'm going to have my h, but since I had a positive 2 in my vertex, my h, when I write it in vertex form, has to be the opposite. So I'm going to write minus 2, don't forget to square that, and my k stays the same. I did not change the k value, so therefore my y was at negative 4. So I'm just going to write my negative 4 down here. I see that my graph was opening upward, so that means this was positive. Alright, so again, we only change the sign of the x value once we find our vertex. Alright, looking at example number 2. Locate the vertex is the first thing. I see my vertex right here, which is 3, 0. So go over negative 3, comma 0. So when I write my formula again, I have that x minus h squared. Since this was a negative 3, I have to take the opposite. Alright, so taking the opposite would be a positive 3 squared plus 0, right? K stays the same. Again, this was opening upward, so therefore I will have that positive sign in front. So my final equation, since k was 0, I can just rewrite this to say x plus 3 quantity squared. Remember, that is an exponent, so please make sure it looks like an exponent. All right, moving down to our next couple of examples here. Example number 3 and 4. Same steps. I have to identify my vertex first, then write it in vertex form. So, vertex for example number 3 looks to be at a positive 4, 4. So I'm going to write a positive 4, 4. Remember, when I write this in vertex form, I only change the opposite of the x. So since that was a positive, I have to write -4. And our k value stays the same. And whatever you need to do to remember that, so I'm going to write +4. My graph, though, my parabola is opening downward. So that means I need that negative sign in front of it. So my final equation then is just like that. The negative quantity of x minus 4 squared. Again, make sure that looks like an exponent. And then +4. Next example, my vertex is at 2, 4. Again, this is the opposite. This stays the same. So when I write my equation, I'm going to write a -2, taking the opposite of that, square it. And then I'm going to add 4 because that stays the same. Looking at my parabola again, though, this does open downward, so I do need that negative sign in front. So negative x minus 2 quantity squared plus 4. Alright? Well, looking at the next page, if you go ahead and flip over to examples 5 and number 6, now we have to pull out our vertex from an equation and then graph it. So looking at examples number 5 and number 6, I have two equations here. And going back to vertex form, remembering it's that plus or minus quantity of x minus h squared plus k. When I have this form, I try to find what's attached to my x being squared. I don't have a parentheses here. I just have an x. So the fact that x is by itself, all this means this is going to be x minus 0 quantity squared and then plus 6. The fact that I have my vertex then, now I see my h and my k very clearly. I know that my vertex is going to be at 0, positive 6. Alright, so just like if I don't have anything in the parentheses back and add a 0, if I didn't have a term at the end of it, like if I didn't have that plus 6, my y value then would also be 0. I know that this is a positive, right? So I'm going to be opening upward, which means my vertex is going to be a minimum, right? I'm going to graph that vertex point. So 0, 6, go 0, up 6 is my point right here. It's going to be opening upward, so kind of a bad graph in this one. But we do know that vertex is our lowest point. So I do have to make a U-shape going upward. Sorry, my board is kind of calibrated a little weird. Doesn't let me make a dot, but it is that lowest point. Looking at example number 6, I see that I do have that negative sign, so that is going to give me a negative parabola opening downward, which makes our vertex the maximum point. My vertex then, remember I have to take the opposite of the x. So if I take the opposite of this, I have to change the sign. So if it's a -2, my vertex point then is at a +2. I leave my k the same. So it's going to be 2, -3. Graphing that point, so over +2, down -3, I know that this vertex is going to be the maximum. So it does open downward. So from this vertex point, I am opening downward. Please make sure it is rounded. It's not a V, it's a parabola, so it is round. And make sure you have arrows at the end of the line. Alright, if you don't already have your calculator, go ahead and just click pause so you can get up and grab your calculator, and then we're going to scroll down to examples number 7 and 8. Alright, so the steps that I'm going to be following in order to graph, because sometimes you're not going to be given, you have an equation, but we need to graph it by hand. That's not in vertex form. So the steps that I'm going to be reading and following are these steps 1 through 4 right there on the side. And the first thing is, well, obviously turn your calculator on. we want to add a new document. And then we are going to, so new document, no, we never want to save. And then we want to add a graph. So in order to add our graph here, we want to make sure that we can substitute in this first function, which is f of x equaling 2x squared minus 3x minus 14. I'm fighting here with my calculator. So I'm going to type in that function right here. Negative 2, oh, it was a negative. Positive 2x squared minus 3x minus 14. When I go ahead and click enter, I get this equation here. And I have to either find the maximum or the minimum. Now, first off, looking at this equation right here, I see that this x value is positive, which means then that if it's positive, my graph is going to be opening upward. So since this is positive, I know this is going to be opening upward, which means my vertex is a minimum. Right? And it is verified here in our calculator because I can see my little parabola here opening downward. We want to make sure that we can locate that vertex point. And the way that we do that is follow the steps picking up on number 3. Number 3 says, well, you can either count the lines or menu. So I'm going to click menu here. I'm going to go down to analyze graph. We already decided that this is a minimum. So I'm going to click minimum. And then we see that little dotted line again. Now, we have to scroll to the left of it. So I'm going to scroll down here. Click enter. Scroll all the way right of it. Click enter. And I see this vertex point that pops up, which does say negative, or is that a positive 0.75, comma, and our y value is a negative 15.1. So that is our vertex point. So that's 0.75, comma, negative 1, or negative 15.1. So my graph here is going to look, it's actually going to be outside of the graph lines that I actually have here. So when I graph this point, I remember that it is a minimum, so it does look like it's facing upward. So 0.75 down here, kind of just going to graph a point right here. That does not mean right point. And I'm actually going to label it. Right, that is a stop there. And from this point, I am going to go upward. And upward. Remembering that this is my vertex, it's a minimum, and that it is opening upward. And I do apologize for my board acting all sorts of crazy. Looking at example number 2. Again, that's not in vertex form, so we have to graph that and locate the vertex. So I'm going to go ahead and either, again, you can press Control G, and you can go ahead and type in the new function. This does say f of 2, so you can kind of just tap upward and erase what you originally had. Or you can also do home, new document, you never want to save. Either one will clear out what you have graphed there so that you can graph something else. So 2x to the second power plus 2x minus 4. I have my function right there being graphed. I do see that it is positive because my function is opening up in the positive direction. Right? I also do see that that x squared term is a positive. So when I graph this, I know it's going to be a parabola opening upward, which means the vertex is going to be a minimum. And let's just find what that vertex point is. So looking at my vertex, I could count this, but it's kind of hard to see exactly. So I'm going to do menu again, go down to Analyze Graph. And again, this was a minimum because my A value was a positive. Now my dotted line, I want just left of the vertex, and then just right of the vertex. And you can see as you are scrolling to the right, your calculator is kind of tracing what the lowest point is. And once you get that lowest point, it stops moving, which means you know that you've gone far enough and you've found that vertex point. So go ahead, I see that vertex is a negative 0.5 and a negative 4.5. So that is the vertex that I'm going to use on my graph here and get this last example done. So our vertex then is going to be a negative 0.5 and a negative 4.5. Graphing that point, remember x comes first. So in negative 0.5 down 4.5 is about right here. And from that point, we want to make sure that we are going up in a positive direction. So from this point, I know my parabola is going to look like this. From this point, I know my parabola is going to look in the positive direction with a circle right here. All right. You can go ahead and move on to activity 2A.2. And if you have any questions on the graphing, don't forget that there are the steps right there, 1 through 6, right above it. Actually, there's only 4 steps in this video. So if you need that, relook at it, or rewatch the video, pause it, do whatever you got to do, guys. I know it's kind of difficult, and we haven't really worked with these calculators before, but hopefully it makes sense. If not, you can feel free to rewatch the video. All right, good luck.